Well, you're most welcome to today's talk. It's Friday, the 11th of November. Now, I wanted to talk today about risk-benefit analysis, but to tell you the truth, I've forgotten what I was going to say. So instead, let's listen to Sir Christopher Chope in the UK Parliament debate on COVID vaccines. It's 12 minutes, but please, 12 minutes.
And I need to start the wind-ups at 5:30. Sir Christopher Chope.
Sir Roger, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I am, as has been referred to now, the chair of the all-party parliamentary group for the victims of COVID-19 vaccine damage. And we've had, the group is now set up and running, and we had this enormously well-supported meeting in Portcullis House last Thursday. I agree with the legitimate concerns of the 100,000 plus people who signed this petition, and I share their belief that the recent and increasing volume of data relating to cardiovascular problems is enough of concern to warrant an inquiry into safety. And although, as I've referred to, the big Hallett inquiry into COVID-19 is going to cover, I think, a lot of this ground, that won't be for many years. And in the meantime, people are being encouraged to have more and more boosters, and they want to know, understandably, what the impact of those boosters is upon their health and what the potential risks and rewards are. I, as chairman of the APPG, and having taken an issue in this subject for about a year and produced a private member's bill, another one of which I hope to be able to produce, have a second reading for next month, I've come across the findings of coroners' reports up and down the country. Those coroners have found that deaths have been caused directly by COVID-19 vaccines. And I've spoken to some of the bereaved, and indeed I spoke to the gentleman who was referred to by my honourable friend, who attended our meeting on Thursday, whose wife was a journalist in Newcastle. And I've seen in my own eyes the suffering that those people are going through as bereaved or as people who are still suffering the ill effects of the adverse reactions. And I'm sorry that my honourable friend, in introducing this debate, didn't really have much to say about the people whom we know have suffered death or serious injury as a result of the vaccines. If I may say to him, I think he showed himself to be rather the victim of producer capture, and the producer in this case being the MHRA. He doesn't seem to have allowed his researches to go far further than the MHRA. Has he, for example, looked at what's been happening in Germany, where the German, they have an institute called the Paul-Ehrlich Institute, and that is the German regulator responsible for vaccine safety. And on the 20th of July, they confirmed that 1 in 5,000 people were affected by a serious effect after vaccination. And that reflected also a finding that they published earlier in the year, in which they tried to raise the alert that 1 in 5,000 vaccinated people has a serious side effect, such as heart muscle inflammation. And statistically, they said every 10th person must expect a severe consequence from having a course of 3 or 4 vaccines. And the Institute uses the WHO definition of a serious adverse event, meaning one which results in hospitalisation, is life-threatening or life-changing. And after a 4-dose course, the risk of a report to their system of a serious adverse effect is 1 in 1,250. Now, that is serious information coming from the regulator in another country which is highly respected for the quality of its healthcare. And isn't it interesting also that the number of adverse reports referred to there is far fewer than the number of adverse reports which led to the 1976 swine flu vaccine being withdrawn. Some members may recall in 1976, Gerald Ford, President of the United States at the time, was panicked by swine flu into organising a vaccination campaign. And when reports emerged of suspected adverse reactions, including heart attacks, Guillain-Barré syndrome, and there were 53 reported deaths, people began to worry about the safety of the vaccine. And the government halted that mass vaccination programme in December of that same year. So in that case, the government acted on far fewer adverse events than we have been talking about during this debate, and decided that it was no longer in the balance of risk and reward was that it was too risky to continue with that vaccination programme. So let's look at these facts, and let's not be just beholden to the MHRA. And if this was a debate about the MHRA, Sir Roger, I would have masses of material which I could bring before us for that. But what I'd also say is this, that the government seems to be in denial about the risks of these vaccines. Only this morning, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer for England was on the radio saying the boosters were, and I quote, perfectly safe and effective. But, Sir Roger, they are not perfectly safe. And there's a question about whether they're effective, but that's for another debate. That they are not perfectly safe is now admitted by the government. Indeed, the UK Health Security Agency has issued a guide to the COVID-19 autumn booster, and you, Sir Roger, may have seen a copy of this. It comes out with the request that you go and get another booster from your GP. Unfortunately, the covering letter from the NHS makes no reference to any risks associated with the vaccine. But if one actually looks at this document, which is included within the envelope, it says a guide to the autumn booster, and one goes down and it talks about serious side effects. Cases of inflammation of the heart, called myocarditis or pericarditis, have been reported very rarely after both the Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines. These cases have been seen mostly in younger men and within several days of vaccination. Most of the people have felt better and recovered quickly following rest and simple treatments. And then it says you should seek medical advice. What it doesn't say is what happens to those people who do not recover. And that is what I would like to concentrate on in the remainder of my remarks. Those people, if they are disabled to the extent of 60% or more, may be eligible for payments under the Vaccine Damage Payment Scheme. And they might get £120,000. But that scheme in itself is not fit for purpose because it talks about terms of disability, which is not necessarily well described in the context of an autoimmune condition, such as those who are suffering from the consequences of COVID-19 vaccine damage. And what about all those people who are only 59% disabled? There's no financial help for them, and I think even more worrying for many, there's no specific medical help. The government refuses to provide specialist help for these vaccine victims. While it has set up long COVID clinics, vaccine victims are being ignored. I've asked parliamentary questions about this, and I haven't been able to get a satisfactory answer as to why there are no clinics for those victims of vaccine damage. And as a result of the government's behaviour, victims are increasingly telling their loved ones and neighbours and friends about their circumstances, and as a result of that, we are seeing a much lower rate of application to get booster vaccines. And a reason for that is because the government can't suppress information going around amongst ordinary people, even though there is very little about this in the mainstream media. But many people now would not touch a booster with a barge pole, and I include myself amongst those. I'm not anti-vax. I had my first 2 vaccines, but from all that I've seen and know about this, I think that the increase in boosters is now, for many people, counterproductive, and for some people it's also dangerous. And so we need to take into account what is happening on the ground. People are becoming increasingly vaccine hesitant. Large numbers of doctors and health professionals are now calling for a complete halt to the vaccination programme because the risks outweigh the benefits. I give way to my right honourable friend.
Sir Roger, there is a fundamental difference between these kind of vaccines and vaccination per se. Yes. Vaccination per se has saved hundreds of thousands, millions of lives here and elsewhere, but these vaccines are qualitatively different. Science matters, but much matters more.
Absolutely right. And of course, as you will know, Sir Roger, I think in the United States, they changed the definition of vaccine, because what we always used to understand as a vaccine was something where you had a small element of the thing against which you were being vaccinated put into your system, so that your system could react against a small amount, and then if you were exposed to a larger amount, it would also react against. These vaccines do not use the raw material like old vaccines. Therefore, in many senses, it's a misnomer to describe them as vaccines at all. But again, this information is not really out there amongst the public any more than the fact that the booster vaccines have not been tested on humans at all during the studies on them. I think, but only on mice. So people are being used as victims for experimentation in this, and that's why people are getting worried. So I finish on this point that Oracle Films, their film Safe and Efficient, A Second Opinion, is available on YouTube, and it sets out and I make no apology for the fact that I participate in that film, Sir Roger, and it sets out a different view about the safety of these vaccines. And I'm not saying we should ban all vaccines of COVID-19, have a complete halt, but what I am saying is that there's an urgent need for the government to get to grips with this issue before more and more people are duped into having vaccines which they probably don't need, are not going to do any good to them, and will present risks to their health.
It's Mr. Bridgen.
Oh, that was Sir Christopher Chope, a Member of Parliament for Christchurch, and he gave way there to Sir John Hayes, Member for South Holland and the Deepings. Now, the film that was mentioned to there by Sir Christopher Chope is no longer available via the medium that he mentioned. Now, there's lots I'd like to say in response to that, but to tell you the truth, I've forgotten what I was going to say. So I think we'll just leave it there. I'm really hoping my memory is going to get better for tomorrow and Sunday. I'm going to take some extra vitamin B and try and get my memory going again. So I am hopeful I'm going to be back in person very, very soon. But for now, I really can't remember what else to say. So thank you for watching.